Hello there, very good evening, and welcome to Let's Talk Politics. I'm your host, Eddie Layne, and of course, we continue to use this program to promote the development taking place in our country under the People's Progressive Party civic government, but also to highlight, political issues that are being skewed, political issues that are being um, used by some for their narrow agenda, and to respond to the lies and misinformation that are coming from the opposition. I have with me this evening the Honorable Joseph Hamilton. Joe Hamilton is the Minister of Labour, and of course, he is a Member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Minister Hamilton, good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, Eddie. Good night. And good night to your viewers.
All right, so a little later in the program, we are going to be joined by the Honorable Zulfikar Mustapha, the Minister of Agriculture. He has been one of the persons at the forefront responding to the flooding that is taking place across the country. Minister Hamilton, before we dig into the flooding, there are a number of other issues we want to address. And of course, when Minister Mustafa joins us, we are going to have some extensive discussions with regards to the whole issue of flooding. But I want to start with a major issue, an issue that is being skewed, an issue that is being used for as a political tool, not only now that but was being used repeatedly by the APNU AFC, first when they were in office and in the opposition, and that is the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic and our response. The evidence is there to show the tremendous response from the People's Progressive Party civic government with regards to the pandemic. Even before we assumed office, His Excellency, then even before he was sworn in, Dr. Irfan Ali, started a program that the APNU AFC, even while they were in office, didn't think about, didn't start to prepare people and to equip people with protective gear, masks, sanitizer, etc. And even before we assumed office, the now president, His Excellency, would have conducted activities to ensure thousands of masks and PPE and so on were in the hands of citizens as well as frontline workers. We have started a massive program, Minister Hamilton, of vaccination against the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we're the lead in the Caribbean when it comes to vaccination. But all we've been hearing repeatedly coming from the opposition, criticisms, including whisper campaigns, trying to deter their supporters from taking the vaccines, etc. Um, this is cheap politics without even considering the health and well-being of the Guyanese people.
Eddie, again, look, you have to understand what is happening this moment. And remember when APNU AFC filed their petitions, Granger and Harman was out there and Rosedale Ford. And at that time, they lied to their supporters that very shortly the PP will be out of government because the court will rule in their favor. Fast forward, all of that has fallen flat on its face. Every issue surrounding the petition, and up to last week, their surrogate, Mr. Lowenfield, a conspirator in attempt to rig an elections, sought to have the court entertain him, and he was lashed down most cruelly by the Chief Justice acting. So everything now is distraction time, where all of these things from day to day, they jump into them. Not that they have any major interest in them, but it is just trying to be seen as being useful. And that is what is happening here. Arman jumped out when the GRA issued a release about the taxes on soap and attempted to criticize the government. And Dr. Ashney Singh had to straighten him out, making the point that this matter has been lingering on the Jordan and on the Granger government. And it was a court order coming out of the CCJ that um, they failed to have it happen. And that is who they are. We have seen all the unconstitutional nature and illegal nature how they function. And so they had no respect for the court. And now he jumps again into making comments about issues of flood, the issue about COVID-19 pandemic. And what is the picture of COVID-19 pandemic? One, Guyana is one of the few countries around here that has continued to pay teachers right through the period of the COVID pandemic since we got into government. So that's the first point. The second point is you just alluded to. When you look at the Caribbean and around this part of the world, Guyana is far way ahead, somewhere about 40% vaccination rate of the people to be vaccinated at the first dose. And the last report was about 13% of the persons already receiving their second dose. When you look at all the other countries and you compare percentage wise what they have done, it pales into comparison with what we have done. Thirdly, we have not, like other countries hit by the pandemic, run out of hospital beds, not in the public sector, and more so, not in the private sector. We have countries around here, and we have seen the evidence that they have run out of beds for patients, COVID-19 patients, at the level of the public sector and the private sector. The other issue is that we have made available COVID grants and we continue to support people, businesses, utilizing different tools and methodologies as lowering of taxes, removing VAT and all that. So when the sum total of this is that Guyana is doing exceptionally well managing the COVID-19 pandemic, regarding vaccination, regarding testing. When we got into office, the Granger government was only able to test maximum 50 persons a day. Today we test over 1,000 persons per day. And so in every region now, you have facilities to treat COVID-19 patients. That was not there when we got into government. And we have been able to source vaccines. We are more than other countries around here they have been able to do. And so the sum total of the response by the PPP civic government and their finally led administration is far way ahead uh, than many countries and their response. So Harman and his hilt, they can continue to chant how much they want to chant. The fact is, the evidence is there. The fact that is evidence. You can't wish away the evidence, you know. And they like to attempt to wish away things, like they tried to wish away the no confidence motion, like they tried to wish away the results of the election. So we know who these people are, we know what they are. And I see the latest thing they do now, Eddie, is the response of the ministers to the flood. They look for pictures to try to slant their nasty racist narrative. trying to give the impression that we are only servicing and paying attention to citizens of one ethnic group that were affected by the flood. And that is what they like to do. Everything for them, they make it into a racist discourse. But the Guyanese people are wiser than that. Every place where they have been affected by the flood, and Minister Mustapha, who will join us very shortly, is more on top of that matter than I am, and he can speak in a definitive way on that matter. So we are giving service to the Guyanese people, and every day the APNU AFC, they are seen as Armon and as irrelevant persons. They are seen as irrelevant persons. Look, the evidence shows Armon, opposition leader, and Amna Ali, general secretary of the PNC, they were in Linden. And I suspect in a big hall, light as all. And I don't know, 10, less than a dozen persons went to see him in a stronghold. So that should inform them as to how and what the people of Guyana and every region they think about it.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your opening comments. And like you rightly said, how cheap politics they're trying to score. Now, the reality is, I'm seeing many of them trying to give the impression that Guyana has run out of vaccines. The reality is, there are vaccines. The issue is, Guyana has paid for enough of the Sputnik vaccine, and we have all the other vaccines available. Enough. The president himself, the minister of health, they all said that there is going to be enough vaccine for every single adult Guyanese who is willing or ready to take the shots. The problem is that there has been logistical issues, delay in the shipment of the vaccines. It is not a case where the vaccines have run out and Guyana don't have. It's just a simple logistical issue that's delayed rather the vaccines being delivered. So I want to say to our listeners that vaccines are still available for the first dose. There's a little bit of a delay with the second dose. So I encourage you, don't be deterred, don't be misled by the misinformation being spread by the opposition. Many of them have already taken their vaccines and they're happy. They know that they've placed themselves and their relatives and the close ones safe, but they want to expose you. Up to today, the First Lady held a vaccination drive along Main Street, the avenue in Main Street here. And if you see the massive turnout of Guyanese people who were there to ensure that they received the first shot. So vaccines are available. Don't be get caught in the web of the lies and misinformation coming from Harman and his gang. And Minister Hamilton, you made a point about the racist rhetoric, the divisive rhetoric that are coming from the opposition. And when we called out the SARE for her racist rhetoric and statements about PUP supporters being lazy, mentally lazy, and so on, Harman himself went to Rusignol and was saying to the people there that, and this is the kind of race hate about, if you're not Indo-Guyanese or you're not PUP supporters, the PPP and their supporters see you as thieves. That is the kind of information, the kind of messaging, the kind of rhetoric coming from Harman and the others, because that's the only thing they can do. The only thing they can do is play on the ethnic sentiments, the ethnic emotions of people. They had 5 years to offer people the good life as they promised. They offered a good lie. Not a single person outside of that clique, that small clique, benefited. And it's for that reason they were kicked out of office. So they come back now and they can't offer anything tangible to the people. So what do? They go to their lies and they go to their favorite trick, which is to spread race hate. I think Minister Mustapha is in with us. I'm not too sure. Yes, Minister is here. Minister, good evening and welcome to the program. I know you've been up and about for the past, well, since you you got into office, but as a result of the weather, the rain and so on in recent days, you've been up and about visiting communities and so forth. And we want to talk a little bit tonight. We are going to talk rather a little bit about our response to the flooding in many parts of the country. Um, no doing of the PVP or any person per se, but it's really nature, the rains and of course the high tides and so forth. But we're examining Minister Hamilton and I were talking about the COVID response and the lies and misinformation that are coming from the opposition. Trying to tell people all sorts of things, trying to downplay our response. And Minister Hamilton outlined a number of things, that took place. He also touched briefly on the statements of poll. We're going to talk about that a little later, but I'm going to give you a chance to come in here.
Thanks very much, Eddie. Good night to you. Good night to Joe. Joe, good night. Good night to our viewers out there. I'm happy that you have invited me in this program. I just came in, as you rightly said. And whilst I was in the quarantine area today, reaching with people, listening to their concern and try to put measures in place, His Excellency, he was in the Berbice River area. And this afternoon, around 4 o'clock, he flew to Berbice and we went in Blackbush Polder and met residents there too. And he was seeing what other measures can be put in place. So we'll deal with those measures just now, as you rightly said. But I want to join with my colleague Joe and say that Guyana is one of the leading countries in this part of the hemisphere in dealing with COVID-19. I think the entire Caribbean, as a matter of fact, let me be very frank, I am chairing the Ministerial Task Force on Agriculture in the Caribbean. You know, His Excellency would have presented a paper at the last Heads of Government meeting. And based on that document that our President submitted, the CARICOM Heads of Government, they have appointed a CARICOM Agriculture Ministerial Task Force, and Guyana is chairing that task force. And during discussion, only yesterday we had a meeting, and during discussion in those meetings, you could hear the sentiments expressed by my colleagues across the Caribbean in saying how Guyana is tackling the COVID-19 in a very aggressive manner, and Guyana has a plan to ensure that we vaccinate all our population. As a matter of fact, some of my colleagues inform me that whilst we have vaccination centers right across the country, they, in some of their country, they don't have those centers, and people are still trying to get the first dose of the vaccine. So we are very fortunate in our country where the government is ensuring that every, as you rightly said, and Joe and my colleague Joe said, that we are trying to see as much, to vaccinate as much as possible the adult population in our country. And you can go to any parts of the country where there is a vaccination center and receive a vaccine. And as you rightly said, that the opposition is spinning it and trying to say that we are not on top of the COVID response. They are the people who are discouraging their supporters not to go and get the vaccine. Although they themselves went and get the vaccine, they themselves have been calling various ministers, especially Minister of Health and other advisor to the minister, trying to get vaccine when the age group did not reduce at the time when we were giving certain age group. They were trying to get vaccine for their relatives and friends who were below the age group. So whilst I am mentioning this, because the perception out there is that the vaccine, according to some people, are saying that the opposition is peddling misinformation that the vaccine is not good for people. But whilst they are doing that, trying to sabotage the program, trying to destabilize the program that the PPP civic government has to ensure that we protect our people from this pandemic and this scourge in society. They want to protect themselves, and that show the self-interest of these people. And as a result of that, if you go back just before March the 2nd, 2020 last year, before the election, because of those things that they did in office over the last 5 years they were in office, that is why they are out in the opposition today. And they were refusing to hand over the government. And we'll deal with that in a little bit later, as you rightly said. But I want to say I'm very satisfied that we are dealing with the pandemic in a way that it ought to be dealt with. We are trying to cover as much as possible our population to vaccinate them so that we can return to normalcy. Many countries in the Caribbean, they are looking towards Guyana in terms of Guyana's program in the COVID-19 response. So I am saying that all of the opposition is saying is just misinformation. They don't have anything to counter the government's program. They are just peddling this misinformation just to create mischief. So I want to appeal to the population out there, like my colleague, that they must ensure that they come to the nearest vaccination center and get their vaccine. There will be enough, or there are enough vaccine, but the Sputnik vaccine, according to what they are peddling, we'll have the second dose by next week. Another shipment will be coming in the country, and they are vaccine across the country. You can go to any center and receive this. So these misinformation, I think, from the APNU, especially people like Harman and company, they are trying to make political ground, but I don't think that they are making any, and they are now clutching at straws, so to speak, to hold on to relevance in this country. So I think that we have a good program, and I think we are well there to advance this program that we have started in the COVID-19. I want to join with Joe in saying that when we took over last year in August, between 40 to 50% per day they used to normally test. Now, Joe, we can test people right in Borbies and get the result in 4 hours. We can test people in Georgetown and get the result in a couple hours. So that shows the reach that we have made. And we have ICU also, not only at the COVID hospital in Georgetown, but as you rightly said, in almost all the region in our country. We have COVID center, we have hospitals, and we have ICU, where we are now um, making it more better, more advanced, so that we can respond more easily to the needs of the population.
Thank you very much there, Minister Mustafa. With regard, but I wanted us to use most of tonight's program to really focus on the flooding that is taking place in almost all the regions across the country. I think, with the exception of probably Region 8, and with the exception of Region 8, all the other regions. And again, we are seeing the political mischief of the APNU AFC, where they're somehow trying to paint a picture, trying to give the impression that the People's Progressive Party civic government is somehow responsible for the flooding. You know, how exactly are we responsible for the heavy rainfall? How exactly is the government responsible for the high tides? And I made this point, I think, on my previous program, and I'm going to make the point again before I invite both Minister Mustafa and Minister Hamilton to speak, that what is happening is unavoidable at this point. It's because of heavy rainfall. This is the May June period, and because of high tides. And if anybody that is negligent in what is happening here, it is these same guys, Harman and his gang, who had access to the state resources for 5 years and failed to do anything to protect people, to improve their conditions, whether to clean canals, to open additional. You can recall, many of us could recall the criticism for the Hope Canal. We remember that. Thankfully, it is as a result of the Hope Canal that most of the lower East Coast and Georgetown, to some extent, are not experiencing what the people in Berbice and the other regions are experiencing. So anybody who was negligent, it was that cabal when they were in office. What is important at this point is the manner in which the government has been responding. This is not a government that would remain sitting in their ministers sitting in their offices and not getting out into the fields to respond to the concerns of people. Even before the pandemic, before the flooding, from day one, ministers of this government, and Joe, somebody said to me the other day, and I would hope to have you back on screen to make this point. Somebody said to me the other day that when they compare the two cabinets and when they look at Joe, the boys said Joe seems to be the oldest in the cabinet, but seems to be the most active all across the country. So it tells it tells the commitment from this government. So even outside of the flooding, the ministers have been in the fields. In the last few days, our response, Minister Mustafa, I'll start with you because you've been leading the efforts to some extent in terms of from an NDIA perspective, the response of the government. So the lies and misinformation, the crazy talk by Harman and his gang about somehow trying to blame the PPP is cheap but dotish attempts at scoring political points.
So I do. First of all, I want to say I can recall when we took over last year in August. The first request I made, and Joe could be with me and testify to this. I went to cabinet for $106 million to do emergency DNI work. Joe, you can remember that emergency DNI work because the farmers were suffering and their crops were at the verge of they were at the verge of losing their crop. And as you rightly mentioned, Eddie, that if anyone was neglectful, it was the APNU AFC because they haven't spent, they are made budgetary allocation for this DNI sector. And we had to start almost from scratch to rehabilitate structures, to clear clog canals, drains, and ensure that we have repair pumps across this country. As I'm speaking here today, I'm very happy to note that although we have had so much heavy rainfall over the last few weeks, a flood-prone area for us is the city. We haven't experienced any major flooding in the city. I was in Blackbush Polder, the Prime Minister and myself last Wednesday, when His Excellency instructed cabinet member to fan out across the country, and I was busily following up on our group that we have, and I saw Joe was in South Romville, East and North Romville area, and those were our flood-prone areas. And in those areas, although we had so many rainfall that day, so much heavy rainfall, we haven't had any major flooding in those areas. That show the way that we have been doing things. We are, although the PNC City Council have been very inactive, we from the level of the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, NDIA, we have been ensuring that we do the necessary work in the capital city to get it in a way that it will not flood easily. As a matter of fact, only a few days ago, we have awarded to the local people in Georgetown, hundreds of local groups in Georgetown, we have awarded them work. They will earn income, and at the same time, they will help to keep the drains in the city clean. So that's the way we have been doing things. So across the country, as you rightly mentioned, in all the other 9 regions, except Region 8, we have had some major form of flooding. And in some regions, we have had a number of areas that are flooded. But the response of the cabinet, the response of the agency of the government have been tremendous. From the president himself coming down to every single person in the cabinet. We have been going out and responding to the needs of the population. We have seen the leadership from the government being uh, displayed in the field to ensure that people at least feel comfortable in raising their issue of concerns and also receiving the responses from government. What we have done, although we have done, if we didn't do the kind of work that we have done over the last 8 months, well, I would have expected that Guyana would have been today. We wouldn't be able to cope with the condition, with the amount of rainfall that have fell over the last 2 weeks, and compounded with the high tide. This time around, this was unprecedented. When you look at the hydromet records, in the last 30 years, Guyana have not experienced these kinds of rainfall in the last 2 weeks that Guyana have experienced. And although we have had so much rainfall, we have areas, yes, that are flooded because of the high tide compounded the situation. And the drainage system in Guyana is incapable of taking the amount of water that has fallen over the last 2 weeks. Our system was catered to take off just 2.5 inches of water in a 24-hour period. We are seeing high intensity of rainfall, almost 5, 6, 7 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. Imagine. And still we are trying to cope, drain the area, and also ensuring that the pumps are working and pumps are available in a number of areas. What we have done to date in all the flood prone areas, we have had ministers visiting. We have made intervention in placing emergency, doing emergency work to ensure that we bring relief to the people in the country. We have placed additional pumps around the country where those areas exist, those vulnerable areas. We are trying to save people livestock. We are trying to save people crops. And at the same time, we are also helping those people who would have suffered tremendously in terms of giving them some items like hampers so that they could cope with the situation. At present, our focus is to ensure that we save people life. We have put people to safety. We are ensuring that they get food to eat, and at the same time, we are looking to save their livelihood. And I think, to an extent, we are coping well, except two areas I am thinking about that we are badly off. Besides Region 9, the Borbis River area, Kukwani, is we are responding to that. The president was there himself today. Blackbush Polder is another area of concern. And what we are doing now, we are draining those areas. We have distributed hampers in those areas. We have distributing feed for the and we are working with the farmers around the clock. We have all our agencies. They are responding and they are there working. So I think that the response has been tremendous so far and will continue to go to these areas. As a matter of fact, tomorrow a number of ministers will be going to various parts of the country. I will be continue my outreach in the region, in Region 6 and the Upper Quarantine, and in Region 5 tomorrow. And then some ministers of government will be going to Region 1, Region 9, Region 10, and those visits will continue because we will continue to be with the people on the ground to ensure that they have this kind of relief, and we are putting all resources available, or we are making all resources available to ensure that we take care of the needs of the people in this time that they are suffering in terms of flooding. So what the PNC and APNO are saying about race, that is chief politics. Today I was in Manchester. I was in Gibraltar, Liverpool. Those areas are considered to be opposition area. But when I went there, I was welcome because the people said over the last 5 years prior to August of last year, they never saw anyone from APNU came there when they had flood. They never saw anyone, and people, and the GLDA was there to treat the people animal. Nari was there to give them advice and things like that. So the people welcome the initiative of the government. They welcome the way we have been responding to the flood situation in the country. And I think that we are handling and we are on top of the situation. Last week, Saturday, we were in Suriname, myself, Joe, Minister Todd, and Jill. And Suriname is under severe flooding also. But you could see the kind of confusion and so that people are experiencing. Unlike us, when we go to these areas, we are going with solution. We are going with measures to relieve the plight of the people in those areas. So what the opposition is touching at, as Joe rightly said, they went to Linden, so I believe today, and you had about less than a dozen persons turn up, where they are considered their stronghold. So I think that they are getting weaker and weaker on a daily basis.
And the issue too is, is not only weaker. What are they going to tell the people, Joe? What are they going to tell the people? Stay in the water. Don't let the PVP help you, or don't let the government help you. But like you rightly said, Minister Mustafa, is that, and it's critical for people to understand the response here is what is important, because you mentioned Suriname. I think Trinidad a few weeks ago was in the same situation. In many parts of the world, we have to realize, we have to come to the realization that we are global warming, climate change is real, and it will have an impact. It will have an impact, but it is the manner in which we respond. And you talked about ministers finding out. You went to I've been to Blackbush Polo several times. The Prime Minister himself, other ministers of the government. His Excellency was there today. His Excellency was in Region 5 in the Maikoni area yesterday, and I suspect he's going to continue to reach out to those communities that are being affected to see how best the government can respond. I'm happy that you were able to report that all resources are made available to support people. Uh, Minister, you have Minister, I think Minister Dharamlal and Minister Bharat are in Region 9. I think Minister Kroll is going to be going into Region 9 tomorrow to join them, and they're going to cover all of the Region 9 area. You have Minister Edgel is returning to the Kwakwani area tomorrow to spend a few days there to take relief to the people. You have ministers have been in the Pomeroon area where there's flooding, and all across the country. The fact of the matter is, the response of the government has been a tremendous one. I want to bring Minister Hamilton here, in here, because again, we are seeing repeatedly the attitude of the PNC, not being able to make really any positive contribution to anything. So what do? They try to give the impression that the PDP is somehow looking at areas where just their supporters are affected. But I can say in Region 10, for example, the response from the government has been tremendous, and I'm happy that Minister Mustapha mentioned communities that are considered to be PNC stronghold are responding positively. Why? Because they've been starved of the opportunity of any help whatsoever from the coalition when they were in office, and they're worse off now. Minister Hamilton, can I
Eddie,
give you?
as Minister Mustafa just mentioned, and he knows that on Wednesday, when the president made contact with every minister, and his instruction was that all of us must be out there in the fields checking as to what has happened with communities. And I was tasked to go to South Georgetown. And the intervention, and Mr. Mustafa spoke about it, the early intervention when we got into office in the Georgetown area. And the fact that you have more pumps and were in the Georgetown area, you saw the evidence of that intervention in South Georgia. When you have all this rainfall over the couple of days, and you only had one puddle of water in Aribaka Street, it informed me how that intervention months ago saved those areas that normally, and all of us know, Aribaka Street Road used to be flooded from the top to the bottom. That was not so. And at the moment, it is not so. I went to Kenview Avenue. There was no flooding there. Not a yard in South Rumbell Wednesday with all that rain. Or in North Rumbell. North Rumbell, some of the streets were flooded, but no yards were flooded. East, west, that whole area there, North Rumbell, we know, used to be swamped out. People used to be swamped out. Houses. But you have seen no pictorial evidence that that has happened, because they did Lampi and Pampi would have been all over the place parading if you have had South Ravel area and the south of the city was flooded. So the intervention helped. Also, whilst I'm in South Rumbelt, North Rumbelt area, myself and Minister Onage Waldron, we were communicating. She rushed to Sophia, and there was no flooding there. And we have the pictures because we were sharing it in the group. And the intervention at Sophia, canals were dug out and so the water had a place to go, not to be in people's yard. So Georgetown, except for spots of puddles, was not flooded. and over this period of rainfall. And so many on the East Coast, many of the villages. What you note, most, if not all of the places where a lot of flooding has happened, there are places that are close to a river. And that is the issue here. A lot of rain, high tide, and the water is rising. And you had Joe Harmon with his asinineness talking about because of our stewardship and the dilapidated infrastructure that is responsible for the flooding. How idiotic you can be. The PP Civic is in government for 9 months. What kind of dilapidated infrastructure we can have? The dilapidated infrastructure is as a result of the Granger-led government, of which he was the chief honcho, as they say. So he had to be speaking about himself. And if, as Minister Mustapha mentioned, at the level of the Ministry of Agriculture, at the level of the Ministry of Public Works, if some of the interventions were not made and the government did not expend the type of money, I think I remember Minister Mustapha coming in one of the early cabinet meetings to ask for over $600 million to deal with the issues of BNI. And no one queried or questioned what he will do with that money. Today, we have seen the positive result of that expenditure. And if that expenditure was not made, and I'm talking here about not 2021, I'm talking about the 4 months. That is when that intervention happened. That is when Minister Mustapha requested that type of money to prepare. And for that matter, he was preparing for the December, January rainfall.
Right, definitely.
At that time, when he made it. Yes, he was requesting for. And so, those interventions, you can see the intervention in Georgetown. All of us. There are no major flooding in Georgetown. When last, under the APNU government, they had boasted, the pretentious crook Patterson had boasted about under them there will be no more flooding. But we saw flooding was happening. So we will not be distracted by their cheap political rhetoric. And I saw Christopher Jones. He is picking photographs out to make a point that the ministers were only servicing communities that are of one ethnic group. I don't know. I was in South Rumveld, North Rumveld, East Rumveld, West Rumveld, the Penitents. What ethnic group predominantly lives there? So these idiots, the only persons they are fooling is themselves. The Guyanese people are wiser than these Lincoln poop politicians think they are. And that is the reason why, as I have mentioned earlier, that's why they're getting the type of response when they go out there. Because what people want, and Minister Mustapha would tell you, because all of us, we have been through the length and breadth of this country. Every region we have attempted to touch based on our own responsibilities. I recall once I am in a deep South Rupununi, and Minister Mustapha is there dealing with agriculture issues, whilst I'm dealing with issues about labor and protecting the people's rights and so. So we have traveled through the length and breadth of this country. And what people want, Eddie, is service. What people want is for a government to take care of their needs. And the PPP civic government, that is what we have been doing for the last 9 months. And Armand and his like can't take that away. The evidence is there in every community. The evidence is there to to deal with the lies that they continue to peddle regarding politics and race. And as they become more desperate, I think they're likely to say some more desperate things. So we have to be prepared for that. But the Guyanese people are wiser, and that is a good thing. And so we continue to work with the Guyanese people for the development of this country.
Interestingly, Minister, you mentioned the issue of desperation, and I was about to make the point that what we're seeing here is pure desperation. It's not easy. You try to mislead people about an electoral victory, and you are exposed. It is not easy. You try to mislead people about what the government is doing, and it's not easy for you to sit on the sidelines and watch a government in a matter of 9, 10 months outdo outdo you who had 5 years in office, and the government in the 9 to 10 months outdid you in a COVID-19 pandemic kind of environment where it is limited to really do so much. So because of what they're seeing before them, because of the positive response from the government in every single area, as it regards dealing with the heavy taxes and fees that they placed on people, as it regards to development at the community level, at the regional level and the national level, with regards to creating job opportunities, with regards to creating home ownership opportunities, with regards to creating educational opportunities. The government has been responding positively. There has been tremendous benefits being brought to people. These are things that are going to send anyone, like anyone in the PNC, in the APNU, crazy. And worse that I think they have now hit the height of desperation with the ruling by the Chief Justice a few days ago, where I think it was yesterday, where she ruled that the SOPs and the SORs must be handed over, copies must be handed over to the Commissioner of Police and of course the Director of Public Prosecution. What that means is that those SOPs will finally, we will see the SOPs that they claim that they had, that Ramjitan, I don't know what Ramjitan said they were doing with them, and another one said that they were locking them up for the right time. Well, they have lost two of the two petitions that they brought were thrown out, and still we haven't seen the SOPs. We're now going to get a chance to see those SOPs, and I think it's for this reason the desperation has hit new levels where they're all going crazy. I mean, many of them were already mad, but I think this is driving the final nail in the coffin. Minister Mustapha or Minister Hamilton.
Um, I just want to make a comment on one of Joe's just now, and he said that they have fooled themselves so much that they fooled themselves out of government, because prior to the no confidence motion, they were bragging and saying that they have a solid 33. And when the no confidence motion was successful in the National Assembly, they started to run helter skelter to do outreaches across the country, trying to see what grounds they could recapture. But it was too late. And they fooled themselves so much that they tried to be in office almost a year extra. And then they lost the election on March 2nd. And then they refused again to come out of office, trying to do all kind of skullduggery to stay in office. So, Joe, they haven't fooled themselves alone for that period. I think they have fooled themselves for the rest of their life. They will not get back into government. At least that generation, right? At least that generation. And I want to tell you that they are running desperate not only because of the program of our government, and we are making advances and delivering to the Guyanese people. Also, some of them are also running desperate because there are internal battles within the APNU and PNC, where they are fighting now an internal war who will control the leadership of the PNC. You see, Aubrey Nartin, he have put out his candidacy, so said that he wants to contest. Another one is saying that they will contest, and then Granger is coming again and say he will continue as leader. So you got a mass of confusion right now in the APNU and AFC camp, And all those things are causing them to get desperate. And whilst those desperation are taking place in the PNC and APNU camps, you are seeing now that they are losing grounds also in the legal battle. We have seen they lost these what you call it, these petition, and now they have the Chief Justice have ruled that the SOPs must be handed over to the Commissioner of Police and the DPP. Now I want to say that the baby party will break up because we will see the real facts. Because many things, as a matter of fact, those statements with poll were already delivered by the elections officer in the various polling places to political parties who had polling agents. But they were making all kinds of excuses, and Lowenfield, as a matter of fact, was trying to make all kinds of excuses to say that, look, this statement of poll or these statement of poll are the chief elections officer who has this jurisdiction alone to keep these statement of poll. And I'm very happy that the court have seen it fit that he has to hand over those statement of poll. And what he have there is a reflection that all the political parties who feel polling agents around the country have in their possession, and that will only what they have there to ensure that they now, when those things will be displayed, those things will be coming out, those statement of poll that Lowenfield will be handing over, that will only confirm what the parties them have in their possession. The PNC, the APNU, they have those copies. And they lost the election. That is why they did not want to show their statement of poll. Ramjatan, they fooled Ramjatan so much that he had to go and talk, yes, they have their winning statement of poll. But Ramjatan himself doesn't know what they have. Ramjatan were told what they said, yes, then get these statements of poll. So Ramjatan can do anything for power because he's so desperate to become the prime minister. He wanted to become the prime minister of this country. So he could have done anything that the Russian come to rig the election with paper and pencil to mark the ballot and all kinds of excuses. So I am happy. I am very happy that the SOPs that were in the possession of the chief elections officer will be turned over. Copies will be made available to the commissioner of police, to the DPP, and that will confirm what the party, what we have, because we receive our statement of poll from the returning officer at these polling stations, and we feel polling agents in all the polling stations in this country. And when we said that we had our statement of poll, that is why we upload it and we put it for the public record on the social media before the declaration of the election. And if you could remember also in 2015, Granger and Company went to the GCOM and said that, look, they have the statement of poll and you know who won the elections. But 2020, when the shoes were on the other feet, on the foot, they didn't want to show. And up to now, they don't want to show. They are making excuses. So I'm very happy that this will ensure and confirm what the political party would have received from the returning officer or the presiding officer, sorry, at these polling stations.
Thanks, Minister Mustapha. I think I'm not too sure if we lost Minister Hamilton there. I'm not seeing him with us, but oh, he is
He's
here.
back.
He is here.
Joe is back.
Yes, he is back. We were talking. Minister Mustapha was addressing the whole
GTNT,
issue
that's GTNT.
of the whole issue of the manner in which, well, the release of the statements of poll now finally, and we're going to see those numbers, Joe. You and I had multiple programs during that 5 month talking about those numbers. So if you joined us too, many days where we talked about them trying everything possible to hide those numbers. Finally, we're going to see them, and I think this will mark the final nail in the coffin of the PNC. This is the death of this cabal. I don't think in the 21st century, and I think you made the point several times, Minister, that these guys were using 1970s and 1960s tactics, the tactics of the Burnham era, trying to rig an election in the 21st century, totally oblivious of the fact that you have cameras, you have the World Wide Web, and they're going to be exposed. And the exposure took place, or the expose took place. But what now will be the final nail in the coffin is the fact that the PPP and all the stakeholders who maintain that the PNC lost the elections going to be vindicated once these statements of poll are now in the public domain.
Look, Eddie. I mean, regularly we have to challenge these liars and fraudsters, eh? And regularly, I suppose, as a government and as a representative of the government, we have to keep edifying the Guyanese people. But whilst we do all of that, I would want to say to all and sundry, what is the most important thing at the moment is to work for the development of this country, to ensure that our people can experience high-class healthcare, whether you're rich or poor, to ensure that our people can enjoy the highest levels of education if they desire, to ensure that our people can be housed and they can have access to all the social services they desire, children, the disabled community, brothers and sisters who are disabled, elderly persons, retirees, so that they can live with some security and they don't become destitute. And to ensure that we have the necessary infrastructure to develop these countries, building 4-lane and 6-lane highways and bridges, and to ensure that this whole country can be connected. So we can leave Georgetown and we can go into any region driving with our families. We don't have to get on a plane, allowing us to see this beautiful land of ours. That is the mission, and that is the Irfan Ali vision, and that is the Irfan Ali government working towards the vision that he has articulated to the Guyanese people and to his cabinet. And we are confident that we will be successful. So yes, from time to time, like we're doing tonight, we have to put the Armans and the Nortons and all of these, whoever they are, into their place and places where they rightfully belong. But I will say this to the citizens of this country, regardless who you're voting for the last election. Don't let us lose sight of what is the primary objective. And for those who are supporters of the government, don't lose sight. The primary objective of the Irfan Ali-led administration is to ensure that this country become a developed, modern country with all the necessary facilities for the people of Guyana, regardless of which ethnic group or which age group they belong to. From time to time, the APNU AFC, they will raise the boogeyman of race because that is the only thing they have. That's the only thing they can say now. They have no policy to put before the Guyanese people, even when they criticize a policy of ours. They put no policy forward. And I have taken this position, any person who criticizes a policy and they have no policy to put forward, I see them as a rabble rouser because they have nothing to offer. And leadership is about offering people solutions. Leadership is about finding a light when there is darkness. And that is what this government is doing, and we will continue to do that. And the Armands and the Grangers of this world, time will take care of them. They will fall to the wayside, like so many others have fallen to the wayside. So I think Eddie or Minister Mustafa just mentioned Cameron Ramjatan. I mean, where is he these days? You know, I suspect he's still looking for the fourth Russian. Cathy Hughes, with all her sophisticated BS rhetoric, where is she these days? And we can go on and on and on. And by the way, Eddie, I think I mentioned to you that Madam Ferguson has issued a legal notice to sue me that Datadin is paying attention to, because I said that she has an interest to picket for Ben, because very shortly Soku will be coming to her, and others who were picketing on his behalf. So she has said I've defamed her, but that's another issue. I'm just mentioning that to the public. And she's the second of the lot. I expect and suspect you will have more of them. You would know, firstly, the Rasta, the guy, Rasta Pig guy, he also, he has filed something there, indicating that it wasn't he who took government money via the SLED, fictitiously purporting to be a co-op society when they were not. So those things are there. And the fact that they're now running to the court to attempt to silence us, that speaks volumes. That they recognize that the corruption and fraud that we are unearthing and bringing it to the public notice, it is taking a toll on them. And that is why now they're resorting to the court in a regular fashion and in a regular way. But importantly, that will continue to happen. But I am saying to the Guyanese people, don't lose focus. The focus is to develop this country in our interest, our children's interest, and our grandchildren's interest. That is the focus. And that is why we have to continue to work, all of us who are in government, and we have to look for like-minded stakeholders to support the government's program and the vision of the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
I probably give Minister Mustafa, if he is there. I think we've lost him again because of the internet. But this is where we have to wrap things up. Minister Mustafa is back. I'm going to give you a minute to your closing comments. I know you're going to be back out in the fields tomorrow to deal with the whole issue of flooding across the country. I'm just going to give you some closing comments.
I just want to join with my colleague, Minister Joe, and say that we are working to ensure that we resolve the issues that the Guyanese people are faced with presently, and that is the flooded condition around the country. We are making resources available, we are making budgetary allocation available, and we are trying to make intervention that will benefit the populace to ensure that we try to bring them back to some form of normalcy as quick as possible. We will be working around the clock, and as I'll be going out tomorrow, I said a number of my colleagues will be finding out, and also they will be having technical officers with them to make intervention on the spot so that we can bring relief to the people. That is our immediate task. We are also working to ensure that we deal with this pandemic in a holistic way, to ensure we bring it under control and vaccinate as much persons as possible, so that we can return to normalcy as early as possible. And as Joe rightly mentioned, we are working to deliver on our manifesto promises so that we can take care and improve the standard of living of every Guyanese. We are not looking at race, we are not looking at color, we are not looking at religious persuasion, we are not looking at political affiliation. What we are working to ensure that each and every Guyanese receive the same form of development that we are doing across the country. And that is a philosophy of the People's Progressive Party Civic. That's the philosophy of each and every one in the government, to ensure that we deliver to the Guyanese people.
All right, thank you very much, Minister Mustapha. Minister Hamilton, I want to thank both of you for being here this evening. And of course, to our viewers, we want to say thanks for being part of the program. We're going to continue to keep you updated. The government will continue to respond to the needs of citizens. Um, whether it's flood or not, that is our mandate, and it's been working over time to ensure that we fulfill our promises in the manifesto. So, this program and many other programs of this nature will continue to keep you updated, to keep you informed of the activities of the government, and of course, time and again, like Minister Hamilton said, we will respond to the lies, misinformation coming from the opposition camp. So, gentlemen, thanks for being here, and to our viewers, we want to say thanks for being part of the program.
I hear you.